Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on PROFIenergy. If you have any questions throughout the duration of the webinar, please go ahead and type those in the question and answer frame on the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. If you're viewing the archived version, drop us an email and we'll try to get back to you as quickly as we can. This webinar will be archived. You'll be able to find it at us.profibus.com under the Training tab, and the slides will be available as PDFs so that the links that are appearing throughout the webinar will be live links that you can click on once you download the slide set. I'd like to thank our sponsors. Without their participation as members of PI North America, we would not be able to present this webinar today. My name is Carl Henning. I'm the Deputy Director for PI North America. PI North America is a non-profit, member-supported trade organization. Our goal is to educate people about Profibus and PROFINET. I'm also the Profi blogger. You can find me at www.profiblog.com and follow me on Twitter at the address on your screen. With me today is Hunter Harrington. Hunter's the PROFINET consulting engineer for the Profi Interface Center. The PIC, we call the Profi Interface Center for short. The PIC is a certified PROFINET Competence Center, test lab, and training facility for North America. Here's our agenda for the next 40 minutes or thereabouts. Spend just a few minutes here talking about the organization that's behind PROFIenergy. We'll give you a really brief introduction to PROFINET since PROFIenergy does rely upon PROFINET. PROFIenergy is an application profile, so we'll give you a brief introduction to what an application profile is and how it's different from the communication protocols. And then we'll spend most of the time in PROFIenergy, looking at why we came about to use PROFIenergy, what it is, give you an example of how it works, list the benefits for different types of consumers of PROFIenergy, and finally send you to some additional places for more information. After that, we'll give you some more generic resources for all things PROFINET, Profibus, and PROFIenergy, and then we'll conclude with the question and answer portion of the webinar. The organization behind PROFIenergy is PI, for Profibus and PROFINET International. It's been around for a long time, since 1989, the largest of the field bus organizations with over 1,400 members. Largest installed base, over half of the installed base of serial field buses is Profibus. And if you look down below at the industrial Ethernet market, let me grab my pen here. If you look down here at the industrial Ethernet market, you'll see that that's divided roughly into thirds, 1/3 PROFINET, 1/3 Ethernet IP, and 1/3 other. We have an interesting concept at PI where we certify competence centers, test labs, and training centers, and we have a number of those in North America, as you can see. We are the only one of the field bus organizations that covers both discrete, process, and automation or motion control. We cover that with the Profibus, PROFINET, PROFISAFE. No matter where in the world you are, there will be someone there to support Profibus and PROFINET and PROFIenergy for you. It doesn't matter whether you're in South Korea, South Africa, South America, or South Carolina. There's always going to be one of these certified centers near you. In North America, the regional PI association, as we call them, is PI North America. We were actually founded back in 1994 as Profibus Trade Organization, but everybody called us PTO. The competence centers, training centers, and test labs in North America are listed there. The PIC covers both Profibus and PROFINET for all three of those categories. Together, we really just have two things that we try to do. One is educate people about the technologies using venues as we are using today. And then we also are here to assist manufacturers of automation devices to add Profibus, PROFINET, and PROFIenergy to their products. Let me give you just a brief introduction to PROFINET by way of an architectural example here. PROFINET is an outgrowth from a field bus of Profibus, so naturally it's going to do real-time I/O. The additional thing that it does over Profibus is it uses standard wireless techniques to bring in I/O wirelessly. PROFINET adds an additional interesting function where it can do machine-to-machine integration. And by machine-to-machine integration, we're talking about the ability to have like one machine talk to another. Motion control is another capability of PROFINET. We can do 150 axes of motion control in a millisecond. We are the only one of the field bus organizations that has described in a specification vertical integration from the plant floor up into an office network, typically where you might find an MES system, manufacturing execution system, for example. And of course, you can't talk about vertical integration without talking about security. I've shown that in oversimplified fashion by just showing a firewall, but we do have a guideline for security implementations in PROFINET. Sometimes people think that OPC might be replaced by, for example, the machine-to-machine integration function of PROFINET. That is not the case. OPC typically resides in a computer somewhere, either computer-based HMI or some kind of computer-based system up in the office. Now, I've shown these as separate individual bits of networks, but it's just Ethernet, so we can certainly put all these things on a single infrastructure backbone. And because it's just Ethernet, we can add things like standard Ethernet switches. I've shown an industrial switch here, but basically any even inexpensive switch, unmanaged switch, would work with PROFINET. But what if I have to connect to some devices that are, for example, process instruments out in some kind of hazardous environment? There is no industrial Ethernet that has a specification for intrinsic safety. So our approach is to bring Profibus PA, which has been around for a long time and is suitable for a hazardous environment, into something like Profibus DP. Perhaps we have Profibus DP already in our plant. We can bring both of those things in to PROFINET through what we call a proxy. A proxy is kind of like a gateway, although the proxy is part of the PROFINET specification, so that the mapping is always the same for any of the proxies. We found this concept worked so well for Profibus that the folks at Interbus decided they would not do an industrial Ethernet version of Interbus, they would just use PROFINET. And we kept expanding that concept to integrate all kinds of additional buses, including DeviceNet, Foundation Field Bus, and many more. Out in the process world, there are many hard instruments. Hard instruments can be brought in directly to a controller, or they can be brought in through a linking device onto something like Profibus DP or a field bus. Wireless HART is an emerging technology. We have worked in concert with the HART Communication Foundation and the Field Bus Foundation to standardize wireless access to our networks from wireless HART devices. If in your system you have just a couple of random on-off type of devices, you can certainly bring those into standard I/O, connect those to something like Profibus DP. If you have intelligence sensors, I/O Link is a new technology which is very suitable for connections to intelligent sensors and actuators. If you have a series of on-off devices, especially if they're spread out some, then AS interface is a logical way to bring those in to your plant architecture. Something new, wireless discrete sensors. PI now has a standard in final review to connect wireless discrete sensors into the plant architecture system through a wireless sensor and actuator network gateway. Safety. We have a safety profile called PROFISAFE. That safety profile can run on many different devices. It can run on a PROFINET controller and PROFINET I/O. It can run inside a drive. It can run inside a process instrument, or in other devices that are down on Profibus DP. Now, if I had an existing plant and it already had some Profibus DP in it, then the architecture that you see now makes perfect sense. However, if I was starting from scratch in a Greenfield project, it doesn't have to be a complete plant, might be an additional line or an addition to a line, then I would start thinking with PROFINET and not think so much about Profibus DP, because all of those things that I can do with Profibus DP, I can do with PROFINET as well. So some of the other networks it makes sense to continue to use. The Profibus PA network's not replaceable because of the hazardous environment that it's in, but many of the other factors or aspects can be replaced using PROFINET. Okay, that was the introduction to PROFINET. Let's talk about application profiles. Communication profiles or communication protocols like PROFINET and Profibus really define how data gets moved over the wire. What the application profiles do is kind of describe how that data gets arranged. So in the case of process automation, for example, we have a standardization of all of the error messages. And for PROFIenergy, which is also an application profile, we now also have a way to standardize the commands and the information that flows both ways in the PROFIenergy system. Okay, let's get into the heart of this now and start talking about PROFIenergy. We're going to look at the why, what, how, and then the benefits of PROFIenergy. Why PROFIenergy? First of all, energy savings. And lesson number one, don't remove the power cord by pulling on the cable, pull on the plug, but still makes a good visual for the concept of energy savings. We have carbon footprints, and what are we supposed to be doing with our carbon footprints? We're supposed to be reducing our carbon footprints. Control Engineering had an article that showed that the Carbon Disclosure Project described most global companies as preparing to deselect suppliers who fail to manage carbon. So no matter what your political beliefs may be, your customers may deselect you if you do not take some steps to manage carbon. We're supposed to go green. An example, Walmart plans to cut 20 million metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions from the supply chain. If you supply to Walmart, that means you are part of that supply chain. But even if you feel global warming is a farce, your customer may not. And I think that's kind of the key point here. So we can't let our kind of political opinions kind of get in the way of what our customers may demand of us. Now, I don't know how it is where you work, but where I've worked in the past, if I had submitted a capital expenditure request and said, the ROI on this is reducing the carbon footprint, it would be doubtful that that capital expenditure request would be approved. However, if I start talking about this kind of green and put an ROI showing energy savings, energy utility bill savings, then that has a pretty good chance of being accepted. And of course, we've all seen energy costs rise quite dramatically here recently. Even the chairman of Walmart says, go green for the money, not for the image. So that's a little bit of kind of background on why we should be interested in PROFIenergy. We actually started down this PROFIenergy path due to a study that the folks at Mercedes-Benz and some of the other automotive companies did. What they discovered in their testing was that even when they were not making cars, they were using 60% of the energy as if they were. And they knew that this represented a potential savings area, and so they set themselves a goal of reducing their overall energy consumption by 20%. They then approached PI and said, PI, we've standardized on PROFINET for most of our automotive applications. Give us a multi-vendor solution that we can use to implement this energy savings, especially during production pauses. If they were trying to do that today without using PROFIenergy, this would be the situation that they would be in. They could add a manual switch ahead of some of the devices that they wanted to control. If these are manual devices requiring a person to go throw them on or off, then they've got to have somebody who throws them on and off in the right order. And they also have to be very careful because it may not be possible to shut all the power off to a particular device. Maybe there are safety circuits that have to remain in operation. Well, instead of using manual devices, they could use an electromechanical contactor here, for example, and then they could write some code in the PLC to decide when to turn those on and off. Unfortunately, that turns out then to be very expensive custom programming and potentially some very expensive hardware to go with that. To do this with PROFIenergy, we recognize that inside some of these devices, there are either electromechanical switches or solid-state means of turning off power or reducing power. So what PROFIenergy does is rely upon those capabilities that already exist, saving a lot of additional expense. In addition, the functions in the controller are standardized, typically in a function block, and therefore custom programming is not really required. When the automotive folks came to us, they described these 4 use cases that they wanted us to handle. The first 3 relate to basically production pauses, breaks in production. The fourth one provides a standardized means of measuring energy-related data. And because they're now able to, in this pre-formatted fashion, bring back this measured data, it provides a means to reduce power or to shave peaks of demand. Utility bills for industry typically are based on 2 factors. First factor is on consumption. The second is on demand. If demand can be reduced, then the overall energy cost for the billing period is typically much lower. If you can anticipate when a peak might occur and shut off unneeded devices or reduce the power to devices that can tolerate that, then a tremendous savings is possible. Let's provide an example here to show you how this might work. Let's take the example of a lunch break. And this is a situation where we have just a conveyor and a robot. We know that the conveyor must be turned off 2 minutes after the robot. And we know it has to start 2 minutes before the robot. In addition, we know some important factors about each of these devices. We know that it takes the conveyor belt 1 minute to switch off and 1 minute to switch back on. And that once it's off, it should stay off for at least 2 minutes. So if we're not going to take a break of at least 4 minutes, there's no point in using this profile. In the case of the robot, we know that it takes 3 minutes to switch off, 5 minutes to switch back on, and it also has to stay off for 2 minutes. So the minimum break time for the robot is 10 minutes. So here's what the example plays out as. First of all, at the beginning of lunchtime, we start the shutdown of the robot, and it takes its 3 minutes. We then have to wait the 2 minutes for the conveyor belt before it can be shut off, and then it's 1 minute down to off. Before it's time for the break to end, we know that it takes 5 minutes to bring the robot up to speed, so we start it 5 minutes before. We know that it takes 1 minute for the conveyor to start, and it has to be on 2 minutes before the robot, so we can do that with this profile. There are many benefits to using PROFIenergy, and some of them are probably obvious to you just because of the savings that you see. If you're a machine builder, you're going to find yourself in a very good competitive condition by being able to promote and sell energy-saving machines. you'll find that it's easy to implement this program because typically all you have to do is in the controller use one of the function blocks that is either downloadable or part of the controller's repertoire of controls. And this is an easy thing to do. It's not like writing custom software as you would have to do kind of doing this the old way. If you're the end customer, there's really two benefits. One is from the standpoint of laws and regulations now related to environmental protection. The other is the reduction of cost. If you're a maker of automation devices, you also have a competitive advantage. And you have a couple of things that make this an easy transition for you. It builds on existing PROFINET technology. Really, typically just an update in the firmware is required in order to implement this. And you're going to make a lot of friends among those eco-conscious customers, the likes of Walmart's and the other companies that are willing to deselect you as a supplier if you are not managing your carbon. There are a lot more places to go to find more information about PROFIenergy. The white paper, the PROFIEnergy Profile, Energy Management over the Network, is a really good place to start. We have a second white paper called Getting Energy Costs Under Control, and a third one which is just about the PROFIEnergy Profile. These links are all live on the slides, slide set PDFs that you can download from us.profibus.com beginning later today. You'll also find a newsletter article introducing PROFIEnergy. And we have a number of videos. We would have liked to show you some of those today, but the technology just doesn't quite permit both the audio and the video to work at the same time. So if you go to the blog, you'll find some videos there. Some of them are ones that I just shot on the show floor at Hanover Fair this year and at SPS IPC Drive Show last year. Certainly recommend the one where Norbert Brausik, who was in charge of the PROFIEnergy working group, kind of gave you an introduction showing a wall in the PI booth with PROFIEnergy products already on it. He was showing products from Siemens, from some of the drive manufacturers, from Phoenix Contact and Mur Electronics, some of the I/O devices that were out there, starters and contactors, Ethernet switches that can like turn off the power in a power over Ethernet type of device. So definitely recommend those. In addition, 2 weeks ago at the Hanover Fair, the folks from Automation World shot a 3-minute video, which is kind of a really condensed version of what you're hearing today. So if you want to send someone for a very quick introduction to PROFIEnergy, that 3-minute overview video is probably a really good place to start. Some general resources that you'll find available, obviously a lot of them on the web. Highly recommend allthingsprofinet.com. It's a relatively new website. Takes you through basically everything you need to know about PROFINET based on your role. So if you are at an OEM company and you're a control engineer there, you can pick out that role and kind of go step by step for a guided tour of things that are probably important to you. We offer a number of newsletters that continue to bring you updated information, new products, announcements of PROFIEnergy products, for example. We have additional webinars besides this one. We offer a series of free one-day training classes throughout North America. If you click on that link, you'll find the remaining classes that are available this year. There's still a number, probably 7 PROFINET ones to go and 7 PROFIBUS ones as well. We offer full-week certification classes. In those certification classes, if you pass the test at the end, you will become a certified network engineer. There are a number of books and booklets that are available. You can click on those links to find those. The blog, some of the questions, if we don't get to all the questions and answer them today, you'll probably find an answer on the blog in the next week or two. We've started a LinkedIn PROFINET group, and we also have a YouTube channel from the Profi blog. So those are all additional resources that you can use for not just PROFIEnergy, but also other PROFINET and PROFIBUS bits of information. Okay, we're going to move into the question and answer portion of the presentation right now. And let me see if anyone has put in a question so far. Bear with me just a minute as I look at that. Okay, someone had asked about an electronic version of the presentation. I think I probably answered that now, but in case you came in late, the slides will be available at us.profibus.com under the Training tab, Past Webinars. You'll be able to download the PDF with active links there. I have a question that I think I'm going to refer over to Hunter. Someone has asked, how do you configure your system to use PROFIenergy? Hunter?
Okay. The PROFIEnergy profile is basically, again, an application profile that runs on top of PROFINET communications. So what the PLC manufacturer will provide you in your I/O controller they'll provide you some programming blocks. So it's usually some PLC programming blocks you'll use in your PLC application, and that'll give you the ability to do the start pause and stop pause commands and the PROFIEnergy commands that are available to set up those timings, like Carl was showing in the example, where you can specify the amount of time you want to start the pause and to have the energy savings in place, and then you would fire the command when you want to start the process again. And so those are, again, provided by the manufacturer of the PROFIEnergy device. If you're looking for PROFIEnergy, you of course want to make sure that the I/O controller you purchase supports PROFIEnergy as well as the I/O devices. There are already I/O controllers and devices available which support the PROFIEnergy profile.
Okay, thank you, Hunter. One really good short question here is, what industries does PROFIEnergy apply in? We kind of maybe talked too much about the automotive industry, and that is certainly one prime example of where PROFIEnergy would fit. But really any kind of production environment where, especially where there are pauses in production or in the action. Logistics probably would be another really good target for PROFIEnergy, where sometimes you're running a lot of conveyors through a sorting facility or something like that, but then you shut down for a time. So those would also be good applications. But again, really any discrete factory automation type thing would be able to take advantage of the production pauses. And any of the industries, even process industries, might be able to take advantage of the measurement capability and then the subsequent capability to shave the peak of load off and reduce the demand that you see and the demand charge that you see on your utility bill. Let's see what other questions we have. Is PROFIEnergy ready for prime time? Yeah, I think the answer to that is yes. There are products already available for PROFIEnergy. There are controllers, there are I/O blocks, there are drives, there are starters and contactors, there are Ethernet switches. All of those things are already available. Recognize that we're early on. There are not hundreds of products yet, but there's certainly a handful of products, and you could get started right away. And even if the product that you're hoping to see PROFIEnergy in doesn't have it yet, the ability to add PROFIEnergy to an automation device is not difficult. Typically is just a firmware update. So really can't go wrong starting to use PROFIEnergy in projects today. Okay, let's see. I manufacture PROFINET devices. How do I add PROFIEnergy? There are a number of ways to do that. Recently I saw a product announcement from the company HMS that does the AnyBus modules. Those modules are often used by manufacturers to add PROFINET and many other buses to products. They introduced their PROFINET version that already includes PROFIenergy application profile built in, and I'm sure many of the other development tool suppliers will do that as well. So really a straightforward addition if you're manufacturing PROFINET devices. Okay, that looks like all of the questions that we have. If you think of another question after today, feel free to use the webinar queue at pinorthamerica.com email address and send that to us, and we'll try to get back to you with that. And certainly the ones that are of general interest, we will answer in the blog. So thank you, everyone. Until next time, goodbye.